Hi guys, and welcome back to Pass and Move. And for today's episode in the Premier League series, we've got Huddersfield for the tactics and team guide. And I'd just like to quickly mention, we're doing this in alphabetical order, so we've already covered everyone above Huddersfield here. And if one of your teams are the ones underneath Huddersfield, then don't worry, we'll get to it soon enough. But obviously, Huddersfield today, so it'll be an interesting club to take over if you decide to manage them. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's their Premier League debut, like everyone likes to say, I think. In terms of their actual history, alright, never mind, it's not Premier League debut. I think it's because it's the new division, that's what they mean. But they have won it 3 times and in a row nonetheless, so it'd be an interesting challenge to take them on and try and regain that dominance of the league once more. But you do have a huge task on your hand. There's a couple of trophies as well here: FA Cup, Championship, Community Shield and Sky Bet League 2. But you could definitely add to their trophy cabinet, which is obviously always an interesting prospect, but at the same time it's even more challenging because of the squad that you have, that you're inheriting at the moment. It really isn't good enough for the Premier League, and it kind of makes sense why you're one of the predicted to go down, I suppose. Here it just says fight bravely against relegation. That's all they really expect. They don't even want you to avoid relegation, they just want you to fight bravely against it. So you have a huge task at hand. It'll be interesting if you can keep them in. I think that'll be already an incredible job. It's not like other teams who are fighting relegation, but you would expect them to beat it. No, Huddersfield are one of the Premier League candidates to get relegated. So in terms of the season preview, you're expected to finish bottom of the table, and that's kind of fair, I suppose, with the squad you've got. We'll go through it right now actually, but one of the first things I like to do is actually have a look at my staff, my coaching staff in particular, in the very beginning of a save, and see whose judgment of ability I can trust. So you got 2 here, Andy Hughes and Mark Hudson. You can go with either one of them, it should be good enough. We can finally take a look at our squad as well. Another one of the few things I like to do before doing anything else is actually going down to my under-23s and seeing if there's anyone who's in the under-23s or under-18 squad who should be a first teamer. So just having a quick look, John and Joel both aren't good enough just yet, so you would assume anyone else isn't, because they're 2.5 stars and they're only Sky Bet League 1 players. Another thing I like to do is also check the age, see if there's anyone over 23 who shouldn't be in either one of these squads, and just sort of promote them. You've got Sean here, but he's out on loan, so you don't need to worry about that. I think there is another player here that I already promoted, so just keep that in mind if you find someone that we have in the first team squad that you don't have. Another thing is obviously I try to sort out what would be the best formation for my team. So one of the ways I do that is sort out the team in terms of ability and try and squeeze in all the best 11 players together. So keeping that in mind, we've got 10 here, so 11 of them. So this is apparently our best 11, and having a look at this, I've decided maybe a 4-3-3 is the best formation for this squad. You can also have a look at the overall squad positions and see if it kind of suits it. I think a 4-3-3 relatively works. We've only got 1 attacking midfielder, and he can even play in centre midfield, so that makes sense. We've got 3 strikers, so it's not necessarily the greatest for 4 positions. But yeah, overall, a lot of these players are championship players. So if you ask me how I like to manage my squad, I like to have a squad of 22 players. So over here you've got 24, which means you have the numbers, but whether the numbers are in the right positions, we'll have a look in just a moment. But at least you know you've got 2 players who you can definitely sell off and make some profit on, if not improve your squad with. So yeah, a squad of 22. If you ask me why 22, I like to say that it's 11 first team players who are already leading star or world-class players, and then a backup 11 of youngsters who can become, have potential to become leading world-class or star players, and obviously they have to be ready for the first division, which is the English Premier League. Obviously you don't have those type of players at the moment, but it's just sort of a target to set for yourself and hopefully build it. So first just aim for having decent Premier League players, and then aim for having good players, and then leading players, and so on. And obviously your performances have to indicate an improvement in the squad, otherwise there's no real point. But yeah, bearing in mind that the best formation seems to be 4-3-3, we can now go through each position, each player, and see where we might need to invest in, and which players we can sell and keep, and maybe areas to invest in. And obviously we can work with the tactics, and that's kind of like like the whole point of the episode, really. So we've got 2 goalkeepers here, which is perfect. We want 2 players per position. The question is, are they of quality enough? So Jonas here, or is it because he's Danish, is it Jonas? I don't know. But either way, he's on loan from Mainz. He's only a good championship player, and that's an issue because Robert Green is also just a championship player. So your goalkeeping department is certainly an area that needs improvement and is a bit of a worry, to be honest. You're paying, I think, Jonas's all his salary, yeah, and it looks like you are. He's on loan, but you do have an option to buy him. But if you ask me, the goalkeeping area is a bit of a worry. So my advice, you can't terminate his loan, so maybe when Robert Green is available you could sell him, move him on and bring in someone. Nope, apparently you just signed Robert Green, so it looks like you might be stuck with these 2 goalkeepers for this season. But maybe try and have a look at possibly, does it say in the contract itself? Oh, okay, it can't be terminated, so that won't work in January either. Maybe you could try and move Robert Green in January, in the January transfer window, and then bring in a better goalkeeper. But definitely, goalkeeping department is an area that you want to improve in. Like I mentioned, you want 1 leading goalkeeper and then 1 backup youngster with potential. Right backs, you've got 3 of them: Martin, Tommy, and Florent. Now, Florent is on loan, but you don't want to get rid of him just yet, because as you can tell just by the general look, Martin is only a Sky Bet League 1 player, so not even a championship player. It's incredible how he's still at Huddersfield. He's also out for 2 to 4 months, so it's unlikely you get to sell him in this window, so maybe try and sell him in the January transfer window. He's worth 1.4 million, so, and you know, you can get him off your wages as well, so it'll be okay. Maybe send him down to the under 23s for now. That leaves you with Tommy Smith and Florent, and I feel like it's a decent area. Tommy's the better one, and that's why he's going to be in our first team. Florent is the backup, but they're both championship players, so again, another area that you need investment in, and heavily. It's not like you've got 1 decent Premier League player and then the backup is a championship player. Both of them are, so you definitely need to improve on that. Florent, for example, is your backup, and you can't terminate his loan either, as it says here, loan clause, so it's going to be a bit of an issue again. But if you ask me, do not activate the optional future fee. You don't need to buy a championship player. You need to improve and hopefully set up a Premier League ready squad. But yeah, maybe you could get rid of Tommy Smith, for example. He's 10.75 million worth. That would be a decent. He's been at Huddersfield for quite some time. You signed him for free, so selling him off for 10 million would be quite an improvement. The problem is, at the moment, he is your first team player. So I have to mention this, like I always do in all my episodes: do not sell and then buy. Buy and then sell. You don't want to sell a player off and then realize you're short of numbers, and that the player that you were hoping to bring in has suddenly, you know, you can't bring him in for some sort of reason, whether he's rejected the contract or the transfer fee suddenly increased because people know you have money, all that sort of business. So you have to be very careful and only sell when you're 100% sure you can buy. And this is especially important for smaller clubs, or so-called smaller clubs, because obviously you don't have the finances to actually bring in anyone else. So just to give you a quick idea, you've only got 8 million to spend, and the truth is, I like to have it in the middle, leaning towards the transfer budget, so you actually kind of have more like 5 million, because if you keep on 8 million, you've only got about 40k wages to give away there, and that's not too much to work with. Obviously it's a lot for Huddersfield, but at the same time you don't want to stretch your finances that thin anyways. Bearing that in mind, you're 44 million in debt, so you know, you do have to be very careful. So always buy first and then sell. The truth is, with the financial issues that you've got at the moment, you might be better off actually, you might be better off not even buying any players, to be honest. You have a fair amount of debt, I suppose, but the projection should be better because you're in the Premier League, so it really is a huge aim to try and stay in the Premier League so you can keep that Premier League money. But you might be better off just keeping the squad that you've got at the moment and sort of just working your way through free transfers until you've got some sort of money in the balance that you can actually spend. It's just, you know, I'm just giving you advice on who to sell and who to keep, but this is sort of a gradual process, and don't try and do them all in one season. I don't think you'll be successful in that man anyways. But at least, you know, right back is an area that needs investment in. You've got 3 centre backs, that's an issue. You need 4, so you do have a squad of 24 players, but like I mentioned, some numbers are stronger in other areas. For example, you've got 3 right backs, but you've only got 3 centre backs and you need 4 of them. But bearing that in mind, Matthias is a decent player for the Premier League, so you can hold on to him. There's no issues there. Christopher is going to be your other, your other centre-back partner, but he is only a championship player, so you will want to eventually move him on, and maybe improve on that. So you do need a fourth centre-back because Michael's a Sky Bet Championship, and that makes 3 centre-backs. Your fourth one, you might be better off trying to find a good partner for Matthias, bringing in a quality centre-back. Maybe even just on loan since you don't have the money for it, but just bring in someone who's already ready for the Premier League division. And that way you've got 2 centre-backs, and that's at least 2 players, or your first 11 sorted. Your backup 11 will definitely need some improvement, but at least, the first one's sorted out. Left-backs, you've got 2 in Scott Malone and Chris Lowe. Chris Lowe is a decent Premier League player, so at least that's sorted, but your backup is certainly not good enough in Scott Malone here. A championship player, you will definitely need to move him on as well. Let's see, he's worth 3.5 million. You've just bought him, so the likelihood is that you won't actually be able to get rid of him just yet, but maybe you could try in January. This Huddersfield squad, if you ask me, you won't be able to do anything in the first window. You're going to have to try and sort some things out in the January transfer window, and just really keep an eye out on the free transfer market and loan market up until your finances increase. But it's just such a huge deal for you guys to stay in the Premier League. Otherwise, that can be, can cause some serious damage. So in terms of midfielders and defensive midfielders, you need 6, but you've only got 5 here. If we include Casey here, then that makes 6. So I think we should do that because otherwise he doesn't have a spot in the squad. So at least number-wise, you're safe. Your first 3 players are going to be Jonathan Hogg, who's a championship player, so you can definitely improve on him. Aaron Moy, he's a good player for Premier League side, so that's good. And you've also got Danny Williams, who's a championship player. So again, a lot of reliance on Aaron Moy here. But yeah, your backups are okay. Philip is a championship player. He can prove still, so maybe you might want to sell him, send him out on loan and bring in another loan player who's actually good enough for the Premier League. Who's the other backup? We already talked about Philip, didn't we? So Dean Whitehead, for example, is a player that you definitely want to move on. He's just a Sky Bet League 1 side, so that's 2 divisions down, and he's certainly not good enough for the squad. 35 years of age as well. The likelihood is he's just going to leave at the end of his contract, to be honest. But you could try selling him, but again, you have to be careful who you sell and who you invest, which areas you invest in. You bear in mind you already have 3 loaned players already. So I think you've only got about 3 more that you can bring in. I can't remember how many long-term loans you can bring in. Also bear in mind that Jonathan Hogg is out for 7 weeks to 3 months, but that should be okay because by the time he's back, the Premier League will have just about started. And that leaves you with your other backup, Casey Palmer. So he's a loan player, he's a championship player though, so that's a problem. I think you can terminate his loan, but don't do that until you can find someone that you can actually bring in. He's on 20k wages, which is kind of hefty, so you might be better off, moving him on and bringing in an actual player who's ready for the first team. In terms of wingers, you've got Tom Ince here, you've got Rajiv here as well. You've got Ilyas, Joe Lolly, and Abdulhamid Sabiri. So this is another area where you're kind of overstocked. You've got 5 wingers, but you only need 4. But again, in terms of quality, it's only Ilyas who's good enough. He's a Premier League player. Everyone else, surprisingly, even Tom Ince, I thought he'd be good enough for the Premier League. Maybe his ability will sort of change a little bit later on. But he's a championship player, and so is everyone else here. So winger is a real issue. But in terms of the best players in your current squad for the winger positions, you've got Elias and Tom Ince, who are going to be your starting players, and we'll talk more about them once we get into the tactics. But as you can see, Joe Lolly as well is another championship player. Abdulhamid Sabiri can improve and hopefully become a Premier League player. So you might another player you might want to consider sending out on loan to a championship team and bringing in someone who's ready on loan for the first team, for the first division, really. In terms of strikers, it's another issue area. I don't think any of your players here are Premier League players. But of course, the good news at least is that your first teamer, Stevie, can actually, or is it Steve? Why did I say Stevie? Either way, he can become a decent Premier League player. So you might be relying on the youngster a bit too much for my liking, but I feel like he's expected to be a first teamer. He's on 35k wages. It wouldn't necessarily make sense to send him out on loan and bring in another Premier League player on loan. It would make more sense to possibly get rid of either Laurent or Colin here and bring in an actual player who can be ready for the Premier League. The problem is that you just bought Laurent, and Colin is also, no, you bought him last season, so maybe you could get rid of Colin, and that 450k could hopefully be put to good use. But yeah, I mean, the Huddersfield club made some seriously strange investments. The players that they bought in didn't necessarily improve their squad, and really you've only got about a handful of Premier League players. I think half of your first XI are going to be Premier League players, and that's it. So that's definitely not good enough to, you know, actually challenge for staying in the Premier League. And that's probably why the board just expect you to put in a good fight. But if you can, you know, pull off a miracle, and it really is a miracle, then you can definitely improve this Huddersfield squad tremendously and start to climb up the table. They're definitely the team to take over in terms of trying to improve heavily in the Premier League at least, and because they have such low expectations, and you know, obviously I think so far of all these teams I've seen here, this top 8 here, they are the weakest squad I've seen by miles really. At least Burnley and Bournemouth and Brighton, all 3 teams, they had at least the first 11 of, you know, decent Premier League players. The issue was squad depth, but Huddersfield's issue is actually their first 11 isn't good enough as well. But keeping that in mind, at least we're playing a 4-3-3 formation because it brings out the best out of our players. The thinking behind the tactic was, how do we play a 4-3-3 formation, which is kind of naturally a bit attacking with some, you know, defensive security and defensive midfield. But how do we play that formation and still get the best out of the squad while also you know, competing in the Premier League? So my thinking was, as I think some of you have noticed with some other teams, was to play possession football. Now, possession football is actually more defensive than you actually think. So that's why we're going with the mentality of counter, structured team shape, and shorter passing. You can change shorter passing for retained possession, and in terms of mentalities, you can also work with the defensive mentality. Now, possession football is actually not as attacking as everyone thinks. It's more of trying to keep the ball, playing safe option passes, and you know, also keeping a good team shape, of course. That's why you're playing with a lower mentality. So it's not high risk football, it's not a high risk mentality, and that's why we've gone with counter, and it really just makes the most sense. So considering our formation and considering how we're going to be trying to play, because, you know, 4-3-3 formation naturally suits possession football, we've gone with the possession football because it's defensive and keeping the ball, and hopefully we won't be exposed and we can actually do a decent job. So in terms of the role, 1 by 1, it's not really the perfect thing for possession football, but obviously, you know, we kind of have to work with what we've got. So Mooney is he's most comfortable as a target man, and it seems to make the most sense in terms of his attributes. Complete forward, he could probably do the job a little bit as well. So, you know, I'm just trying to play everyone as much as possible in their preferred roles. So bearing that in mind, we're going with a target man, but obviously in terms of keeping possession, target man's not the best. You could possibly try complete forward. If he's putting in poor performances, you could probably go with the target man once more. Deep lying forward would be a decent shout as well, but again, as you can tell here, it's only half his actual ability. He'll be very uncomfortable in that role, but his attributes do kind of suit it. His decision making is a bit of a worry, because we do need a striker who's on support who actually has good decision making. A false 9 defensive forward are also decent options. If you ask me though, for possession football, playing a defensive forward on support role is probably the best in terms of you know, for possession football. Not only will they try and win the ball back for your team, but they also don't take too many risky passes, and that's kind of good for your striker, because you don't want your striker, you know, being the main man to actually create chances and whatnot. You want the rest of your midfield doing that. He's sort of just leading the line. So playing on support, defensive forward on support would be a decent shout. You've got wingers on either side in Ince and Kachunga. Kachunga is a natural right winger. If you ask me, he could be very talented as a poacher. In the striker department. I think he's very good other than concentration, but obviously his natural position is a winger, and he's most comfortable as a winger. His crossing needs some work, but otherwise he's quite decent. He'd be probably a decent inside forward as well if we could retrain him in the left position, but obviously, like I mentioned, we're trying to bring out the best out of the squad, so we're trying to play them in their natural positions, in their natural roles. So we've got Kachunga there. Ince, even though he's not good enough for the Premier League, We are playing him on the left flank now. His best, according to him, what he's most comfortable with is an inside forward, but I'm not too comfortable with it, and it also doesn't let Kachunga play. So you know, he's left-footed, so if we play him on the right, if he's playing as an inside forward, it has to be on the right. Now, why I'm not comfortable is his decision making is quite poor. His vision you can kind of get away with as an inside forward, but his decision making is not good enough. He has a player trait of cuts inside from both wings, so it's going to be a bit of an issue because we are playing him on the left flank as a winger. The winger role takes away the decision making attribute and vision, but obviously his work rate isn't too good, so you know, just know that you can't rely on him to do too much defending, I suppose. But even as playing him as a winger, he's going to cut inside because that's his player trait, so try and get one of your coaches to, you know, to stop him from doing this, because we definitely need that to stop if he's going to be playing on the left wing. To complement them, of course, wingers work best with fullbacks, so we've got one fullback on support. Ince is going to be a winger on attack because Kachunga is comfortable as a winger on support, and we've got a fullback on attack, so it's two different flanks with good balance, you know, and playing in opposite roles, I suppose you could say. So keeping that in mind, we're going with the midfield. Now, the midfield is kind of an area that you need to make some decision making in. So Hogg is naturally a defensive midfielder, and he's naturally a ball-winning midfielder as well, and it is definitely his best role. I've tried to see if he'll be good as a defensive forward, but I'm not defensive midfielder, sorry, but I'm not comfortable with his composure because, you know, we're going to be trying to keep the ball, and if he's a defensive midfielder losing the ball in, you know, bad areas of the pitch with his composure, then we can't work with that. The other defensive roles are halfback. Again, composure and vision are needed, and technique as well. He's not good enough there. Anchorman wants more composure. Deep line playmaker, no vision, no composure. And that's kind of the roles that we had to work with. So my decision was that he's going to be this holding midfielder, but playing as a ball-winning midfielder on defend duty. Now, that's definitely a holding role. The problem is it's not that obviously the most, most secure holding role. Now, the other issue that comes up is that Williams is also a ball-winning midfielder naturally. Now, it says here he is comfortable playing as a Mezzala, but the problem is his attributes don't suit it at all. He's got finishing and anticipation, composure, decision-making, and vision are all very poor for that role. So I thought ball-winning midfielder is what suits him best. Box-to-box midfielder is a decent shout, but again, it brings in his other bad attributes. Carrillo, all these other roles really just don't suit him at all, so it's kind of an issue, and ball-winning midfielder seems to make the most sense and his best attributes. So we're going to go with two ball-winning midfielders, and hopefully the midfield isn't completely out of order. Moy is going to be playing as the Mezzala on attack. He's most comfortable as an advanced playmaker on attack, probably is a really good shout too. His acceleration pace isn't too great. But yeah, he as an attacking midfielder, he's got some really great attributes. The deep line playmaker also is another decent shout, but we're playing him as a Mezzala even though he's not comfortable with it, and we have him on attack duty, and it works with the target man on support. You don't have a natural attacking midfielder here, so you need someone from midfield in deep, pushing up forward to support the target man, and that's what we're going with Mezzala. Your only real options are either a Mezzala or a central midfielder, and I feel like why not try out the new role in Football Manager. Central midfielder on attack duty would be a decent shout for Moyes as well, but I feel like we're missing out on using his vision, and he's got some decent work rate in there and other, mental attributes and stuff, so why not go for that role, the Mezzala. The problem is, of course, like I mentioned, he's not too comfortable with it, so your other option is to actually play him as a deep line playmaker on support and play Williams as a Mezzala because he's comfortable with it on attack. But obviously you have to bear in mind his attributes aren't the best. If you do decide to do this though, just bear in mind that you'll have to move him to the left wing. Actually, I'm just showing you, a quick option. I'll move this back to how we had it actually. So just bear in mind whatever attacking duty side you have is going to be with the other flank that is also attacking duty. It works best that way so that they're both supporting each other. And that brings us back to central defence, really. We've got a central defender in Schindler. He's more of a defensive centre-back, but the whole point is that we're trying to keep possession. Defensive centre-back might just lob the ball forward to the target man, which is what we're trying to avoid. Shorter passing should help as well. But I saw that he's got decent mental attributes, so why not play him as a central defender? He might be a hint uncomfortable with it, but it's what brings out the best out of him. Ball-playing defender is a bit too risky for my liking in terms of trying to keep possession, but it is his best role, and he's got some very decent attributes. Matthias Jorgensen, his main main issue is concentration, so you're going to have to be very careful, and hopefully a good team shape will actually protect him. But concentration is such a big deal when you're playing as a central defender. He'll actually be best as a defensive centre back, because that doesn't necessarily need the concentration, sorry. But obviously, like I mentioned, we're trying to avoid that. As a central defender, he'll need concentration anyways. If we're going to take the risk, might as well go all the way and play a ball-playing defender and make use of his good vision technique. But yeah, bearing in mind what we were talking about trying to, you know, bring out the best possession football. So what I need you guys to work towards eventually, if you're going to stick with possession football, is play defensive forward on support. Like eventually bringing obviously players suited for these roles. You're not going to do this straight away from the get-go. I don't think it would work because the players aren't suited for it. You're going to want to play a Rodomantor on one flank and an advanced playmaker on the other flank, I would say. You know, on support as well. You'd want a wing back on attack to support the advanced playmaker, and I think a Rodomantor, maybe I've never actually tried it, but I think the combination of a wing back on support would be decent. A Rodomantor doesn't necessarily cut inside, but he does roam quite a bit, and he sits narrower. So he doesn't cut in, but he does sit narrower, so maybe a wing back on support would provide decent you know, sort of support. So that's how the flanks would look, and your striker would look as well. You've got probably the best thing to do would be 2 central defenders is what to work towards. I feel like in terms of possession football, playing an anchor man might be a best thing. They don't dribble too much. They don't play risky passes. They hold a position. And in terms of the other defensive midfield roles, you know, they don't necessarily close down too much to where you can let someone else do that job, and that's exactly what I'm going to bring it to. So if you play an anchor man here, you can actually play a ball-winning midfielder on support here quite comfortably, and they will win the ball back for you, and you can just sort of have someone who really does hold in defensive midfield quite well. A Mesler on attack would be very interesting. I think it's the best thing. At least you'll have one player playing more risky passes. But if you want to try and keep possession even more, you can go with the alternative, which is a central midfielder on attack duty. I feel like that would work best, and that's how your, you know, possession football team should eventually look like. But yeah, I think that's kind of all for today's episode. We covered most of the major things. Of course, you're gonna have to improve on staff, the training, all that sort of business. The schedule, you can maybe sort out some better friendlies, really. Competitions, expectations, 4th round, 3rd round, you really just have to get through one game of football, which you should be able to do. But really do not underestimate either the FA Cup or Carabao Cup. Obviously you have a better chance in the League Cup, but if you do win either of these cup competitions, you get Europa League football. So even if you do get relegated, at least you might still have European football, which obviously will be very strange, but it will also be incredible in terms of finances. Scout system has been revamped, but you can work towards the advantage. Try and put as much budget as possible into your actual packages. So you're only on UK and Ireland. If you can get these both up to world, that would be perfect for, you know, a Premier League team, really. In terms of the club board finances, we've talked about all of that, really. Under 23s, maybe players to look out for, youngsters to look out for. We've already talked about in terms of ability, no one necessarily standing out. These are all sort of Sky Bet League 1 football players, so they're not even that close to being first teamers just yet. But in terms of potential, you've got just about 3 players here, really. Stankovic, Williams and Dennis. All 3 of these players have a real possibility of becoming first teamers, but obviously it depends on whether they actually fulfill the potential or not. Bear in mind, some of these might not fulfill the potential, some of these might exceed their potential and become first teamers. So, having said all of that, I think that we've covered everything in today's episode. If you did enjoy it, then of course, please do hit the like button and subscribe for more Daily Football Manager 2018 content. And as always, guys, thank you all very much for watching.